conversation that I've been wanting to have for a while is one on mental health, and I think it's just so important that it's something on the forefront of our minds that we're often talking about, because there's so many people out there, way too many people out there that are so alone in this and that are struggling with depression or anxiety, and they have no one around to support them. But when we talk about it, we bring light to it, and we create these safe places where people feel like they can open up and feel like they can be vulnerable. But getting to that point is really hard, and so I think we want to acknowledge how hard it can be, but also provide hope that we're a community that is not going to shy away from this, and that we're a community that is going to talk about these hard topics and just be in this together and figure out, what does this mean for us as individuals, what does it mean for our community, and how can we just continually address these issues.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining us on the Ascent Conversations. We're so happy to have you here today. So you wanted to start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Gill, and I am the Refuge Program Director here at Riverwood.
And what is the Refuge, just so for people who might not know?
The Refuge is a community support program for women and their families in the Elmwood community.
Oh, that's awesome. I love what you guys do and just how you support women in this community and are advocates for them. One of the things that we're wanting to talk about today, though, is mental health and mental illnesses. And even though there's so much advocacy for mental health, at least so much more than there used to be, there's still a lot of misconceptions about it, and just things that, especially in the church, that we don't understand and don't know. How does it connect with the Bible, and what does God say about it, and all that? But we've talked about it a little bit before, just in the office, and you're super passionate about it. Where did that come from? Where did that start? Where did that passion begin to build?
I think it started from personal experience. When I was younger, I was diagnosed with depression, and I received a lot of input from people, some positive, some negative, and it just really got me interested and passionate to see people live through depression and come out on the other side, and just have their faith grown and made stronger because God put that in their life.
Ah, cool. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, how would you define depression? What is it?
Depression can be defined by a number of different characteristics or symptoms, but it is a period of time in your life where it's not the normal blues. It's an extended period of time where you're not yourself. Some people have trouble sleeping. Some people can't eat. Depression can show up in aggressive behavior and anger, extreme sadness, not wanting to get up in the morning, not being able to sleep, different characteristics like that.
Okay, so in a season like this where everyone's kind of in a funk, or a lot of people life is just so not normal right now, how would you know if you have depression, or if you're just in the season of blues, or you're just impacted by something going on? Is it situational at all, or how do you differentiate that?
I would say only a medical professional, doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, would be able to diagnose that. Okay. So if you are having, or if someone is having extended periods of not normalness, right? Not being able to do their everyday tasks like they have been, when people are just not themselves, and when you're going through it, that it's not a normal sad day. It's an extended period of time where you just can't manage.
So a lot of people, I think, maybe think that God doesn't have much to say about it, or they'll say just have faith, or just pray, or that it's not actually a health issue. But what would you say to that, and how would you say the Bible approaches mental health?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess first of all, what does the Bible say? Does the Bible say anything about mental health or mental illnesses?
Specifically labeling mental health or mental illnesses, no. But we see a lot of different stories in the Bible that definitely could be mental health or mental illness related. And although it doesn't directly give you a formula of how to approach someone or how to even address the issue, Jesus shows us by example how we are to help people with grace and compassion and understanding and simply being there to listen.
Do any of those stories come to mind, like which ones might help us have a greater understanding, like any of the Bible stories?
Well, I always think of the verse in Romans where God said, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So he tells us, there's going to be stuff in your life that is super difficult to deal with, but he also promises that he will remain faithful with us.
Right. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean pray it away. That doesn't mean if you have enough faith that your depression will be healed. It means that God's with you walking through the medical appointments or when you're diagnosed or when you're talking with someone. He doesn't leave you.
Yeah. So how as Christians can we use that to then respond to people in our own community that is maybe struggling with their mental health?
I think it's really important to just always have open conversations. None of us know all the answers, and everyone's situation is a little bit different. Right. So just being open and being present, sitting with someone and not even saying a word, allowing them to just cry to you or talk to you. Sometimes that can be the best type of support.
Yeah. So what would you do if I had a friend that maybe was struggling with their mental health? Maybe I know specifically that they have depression or anxiety. Maybe I can just tell they're going through a hard time. How do I even begin to approach that? Like, is that something that you can just be like, hey, I've noticed this in your life? Or are there less forward ways? Like, what would you say to someone who's wanting to respond to someone in their life?
I would say it's really important to have a strong relationship with that person before you begin to speak into their life.
That's good.
Having years of being there for them, they're probably going to be a little bit more receptive to your voice in their life, right?
Yeah.
So if my best friend came up to me and said, hey, Jen, I know that you've been off lately, or you've been more reactive lately, it might be really hard to hear at the time, but praying for them in that situation as well, and just that they would be able to take in your words and take in your concern and then evaluate their own life and their own selves and get the support that they need.
Yeah.
I think it's important too that as a friend, if you're there with them, that you can also offer to walk alongside them through the practical things like going to a doctor. Just having someone there to support you is so important.
Yeah. Do you find that most people want other people to know, or is this still, I feel like a lot of people want to hide it and don't want other people to know that they are struggling with their mental health? If someone was in that position, what would you want to say to them, or how would you respond to them?
I would probably say I get it. I understand that, it is seen as a weakness still. Even though there's so much education around it, it's still seen as a weakness if you can't get out of bed in the morning, or if you can't parent for the day, or if you're just having an off day. It is seen as a weakness. But what I would say is that it's important for others to understand where you're going and what you're going through. And it's also, just to keep the dialogue open so that people know that you're a safe person to go to.
Yeah. How do you show that you're a safe person? Like, are there just practical things that you can do?
I would just say being a good listener, being present, supporting people, and to show that is being a good friend, really.
Yeah. What are some questions that you can ask? Like, so if I were to have a friend who's struggling with this and they were open to me speaking into their life and listening to them, are there questions that I can ask that could be helpful for them to process? For me to listen, usually I need to start that conversation, but what does that look like?
Like you had mentioned before, kind of saying, like, I noticed, this is going on or this is happening in your life. Like, I'm here to listen if you want to talk. I believe what you're going through is real. I think it's so important that people know that they're believed. That this isn't something made up in their head, that this is a true feeling of despair, and that you as a friend believe them and want to support them.
And that their emotions are valid and that it's okay to feel that way. Like, I know just whenever I'm going through a hard season or I'm just having a rough day, I feel like a terrible person for feeling that way. And so I need people to be like, no, it's okay. Like, you can cry, you can be mad, you can feel this. I almost need permission to feel that way. Otherwise I just like start hating on myself. So I feel like that's such a real thing, like the affirmation of, this is real, you're not making this up, and it's okay. But let's not let you stay there. Let's try like journey with you.
And sometimes in the season of depression, or if you're going through a depressive like episode, sometimes you can lose touch with reality. And it's like when you're teaching little children like big problems versus small problems. Sometimes as adults, we get lost in that, and we find it hard to decipher what is like a really big thing and what's a small thing. And sometimes everything just seems like a really big deal. And so it's important to have people in your life that are kind and compassionate and understanding, that can say, like, put kind of you into a reality check as well, and just say, hey, is this as big as a problem?
As I feel it is. Yeah. What about when people, so someone might be listening and they're like, okay, great, you're saying like talk to the people in your life that really love you or care for you, like find your support community. But the reality is, like, some people don't have that, or some people maybe the people in their life aren't the most compassionate people, or they don't trust them. How do you even begin to build that community that can support you?
Throughout the city, there are a lot of like peer support groups. I know Canadian Mental Health Association has some. There's an agency called Sarah Riel. Clinic has various crisis counseling programs. So I think sometimes it's important to connect with people that are experiencing the same kind of thing, that can understand what you're going through. Making friends is hard, and finding those people, finding your people, it can sometimes be really hard. In a faith community, I think it's important. We have small groups. I think that is so crucial. My first small group at Riverwood was 14 years ago, and I'm still best friends with the same people.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
And so those have been my people through seasons of garbage, and through the best moments in my life. So it's important to have that small, close-knit community just coming around you.
And even if people aren't necessarily going through anything right now, I think it's so important to establish those safe places and those connections when you're in a good place, because you never know when something's going to fall apart and when you're going to need them the most. So like 14 years ago, I don't know what was going on in your life, but maybe things were great, but you built that strong community when you were in a good place. And then when things were a little bit harder, then they were already established and they were there to support you. But what about right now? Like, we are in a season where you can't really like go to public gatherings to meet, like church isn't happening right now. And so you can't just like go to a faith community to meet people. What do you do if you're isolated and alone right now?
That is a tough question, and so many people are going through that. It's like things are getting a little bit better recently, but during the midst of COVID, a lot of loneliness and isolation happened. And so now trying to get involved in different programs possibly that can bring you closer to people. There's a lot of online support that's going on. I know many like counselors and therapists are doing sessions online through Zoom, reaching out to your faith community. Even though church isn't meeting, you're working, I'm working, and Riverwood is ultimately here to provide support and
Yeah.
care, and not saying that you're going to have all the answers or I'm going to have all the answers, but we can help to point people in
Yeah.
the right direction.
And we're good listeners.
And we're good listeners.
I think that's one of my strengths. I don't always like talking, but I can really listen.
Well, and that's the key to, if you're going through anxiety, depression, to have someone to listen to you.
Yeah. And sometimes it is so hard to just like randomly reach out to someone, or just like send that email or that DM to someone who maybe you don't know who's receiving it on the other side. Like when you email the church or when you email the Ascent, you don't know who's on the other side of that email. And it's such a huge step, but it's so important. I think there can be a lot of breakthrough in that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of, whenever people do like just randomly email it, like I'm amazed at their courage to do that. I think it shows so much about their strength and their resilience and their willingness, like, I'm not in a good place and this isn't okay. And I need to like get myself out of this with a community around me.
Yeah.
So
vulnerability is so difficult.
Yeah.
But it's so brave, and it leads to deep, strong connections, not surface connections, but when you can truly be vulnerable with someone, there's a different kind of bond that happens.
Yeah. How would you encourage someone to be vulnerable about their mental health?
I think, it's hard because everyone's situation is so different. But to just know that you're not the only one that's gone through this, and people who have experienced it can also like often provide a different kind of support than a doctor can. I'm saying, like, I'm not ever saying don't go to your medical professional, because that's the first thing that you should be doing, is reaching out to someone that can provide a correct diagnosis. But to just take a chance and talk to someone, because honestly it is hell living through depression. And it's not a good feeling, and sometimes just having that conversation will just release so much tension.
Yeah, that's huge. So you said that one of the first steps should be to go to a doctor and to allow them to help you or diagnose you. Is it okay to go to a doctor if you're not entirely sure that you actually do have depression or anxiety? Like, I feel like there could be some, maybe you don't know, like, oh, am I just going through a hard season, or am I actually struggling with depression? And then there's almost like embarrassment of, what if I went and they said, no, you're fine, and then I just made a big deal out of something that was nothing to someone else but feels really big to me. Is that okay?
Yes, and I think anyone in the medical profession would say you need to err on the side of caution. If you have any symptoms of depression, that you should be going and seeing someone. And we do have services in the city that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Crisis Response Center, which is located right beside HSC, has trained staff and counselors and psychiatry there 24/7 that can provide support and resources, advocacy for different programs in our city.
That's so good. We'll make sure to like post some of those resources for people to access those.
For sure. And if people are just needing someone to talk to, or wanting to know if they should even go and see a doctor, Clinic with a K offers a 24-hour crisis line as well, where people can access their resources.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to post those on our Instagram and on our website. So even just like whoever's listening, like take a screenshot of it and just save it, just if you ever need it, or like ever need it for a friend even, or whatever. I think having those numbers on hand is so important. And are there like texting lines too or anything? So if you don't feel like phoning?
There is. I know for teens and for kids there is. I'm not 100% sure for adults.
Okay. Well, we'll look into that and we'll make sure to post anything, because sometimes it's hard to like actually speak it out. It's a lot easier to send it in a text.
I'm sure there is. I just know for me, because I have 2 teenagers, that I've looked into them and have suggested that if they don't feel comfortable talking to me during this season, or their dad, that they can text those lines and get support.
Yeah. How can families best approach this with, I mean, there's a few young adults in our community that have kids. How do you, as a parent, approach that with your kids?
I think open conversation is always so important, to just talk about it constantly or on a regular basis, to just know, so your kids are educated that these exist and that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that support is there. And as a parent, I've journeyed with my kids through seasons of good and seasons of bad, and we've always been able to find support, thankfully. Our city has quite a few good resources for youth.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's so important to have these conversations and to talk about it. Well, when I was young, I don't think this was ever talked about. Maybe it was and I just don't remember, but I don't remember ever really talking about it until after high school. And then all of a sudden, like, all these people started speaking out about it, which was amazing. But I think even I had all these misconceptions about it, that I thought, that it was rare. I think I didn't realize how common it was until after high school. And I noticed that people were talking about it. I think I felt like it was a weakness thing, which now I realize how wrong that is. But you just assume it's like, oh yeah, why can't you get out of bed in the morning? Why do you not feel so motivated? And then you realize actually how wrong that is, and how, no, those people are going through so much. So I think talking about it is so important. How can we bring up these conversations in even just like our friend groups or with our families without even saying like, hey, does anyone have it or anything like that, but just keeping this on the surface so that we all know about it and all talk about it?
It's different for everybody, and different families, different dynamics, personalities. For me, if you know me, like, I'm a pretty straight shooter. I will just kind of say it how it is. And so with my family, we've always talked about it. My parents were kind of forced to, I think, because when I was a teenager, that's what I experienced. And they didn't have a lot of education around it either. So they learned. And then from my personal experience, I've just been open with it. My kids probably know more about mental health issues than a lot of adults, just because I'm constantly bringing awareness to the topic.
And when you're open about it, are you open about your personal experiences or
Absolutely.
more so the facts? And what has that done in your life?
It's strengthened my relationship with my kids to know that I'm normal, and that it's normal to go through these kind of things and to go through seasons of your life when things aren't great. And so they know, and I think that makes them feel more comfortable talking to me about it. You'll have to ask them, but I think that it's just created an environment where we're all human, and we all struggle, and we're all here together.
Yeah, and it is so powerful when you find out someone's going through the same thing that you are. I think it's a C.S. Lewis quote. I was reading it the other day, and it says something along the lines of like, friendship is formed when you tell someone what you're going through and they say, me too. And they are like, yeah, I've struggled with all of that. And it just creates this bond of like, oh, we can relate because you understand me more than anyone else does. And I guess that's where, we talked about how do you even like build community. It's taking those small steps of vulnerability, like you were saying, being like, hey, I struggle with this, and allowing people the opportunity to be like, so do I. But we're gonna wrap up right away. But if you were to have like one challenge or one encouragement for the Ascent community, maybe one question they can ask themselves or something that they can do around this topic, what would you say to them?
If you're not going through depression and you're in a pretty stable, healthy place in your life, I would ask, what can you be doing to advocate for those who are suffering?
That's good. Wow.
How can you be a support to them? And what is God called us to do as Christians, as believers? We're called to support those who are at risk. We're called to compassion. We're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus on earth, and that means putting yourself sometimes in uncomfortable situations to help someone else.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is just such an important conversation to have, and I love your challenge of just opening it up and telling people in your community and talking about it. So just thank you so much for your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
You know, whenever I think about brokenness or illness or just being in a place where you just don't feel yourself, I'm reminded that we were not created for this world. It talks about it in Genesis, where God creates the whole world and it is good, and he creates humans and he's right there. He's walking in the garden with his people. But then brokenness and sin take over and the whole world is just put into chaos, and it becomes a world that our souls were not created for, because we were created to be walking with Jesus face to face, right there with him. And we weren't created to handle this brokenness and these illnesses. But I love what it says in John 16. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's telling his disciples about the hope that they have in him, and how right now on earth they are grieving, but one day they're going to experience joy. And right now on earth they experience pain, but one day there's going to be ultimate healing. And then Jesus says this to them in John 16:33. He says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." Jen referenced this verse in our conversation, and I just love the hope that we have in it. It's not the only thing that we can hold on to. There's so many things. If you are struggling with mental health, go see your doctor, talk about it with someone. Have your community come and surround you and remind you of this hope that we have in God. And if you are in a place where you are feeling great and you're in a really healthy place right now, I love what Jen said about being an advocate for those who aren't in a good place, to be that support, to be that person constantly checking in on them and seeing how they're doing and reminding them of the hope that we have in God. And that's the community that we want to be. But if you are struggling with anything, we're going to post some resources on our website and on our Instagram. And these are just places that you can go to if you are in a place where you just need to talk to someone. There's some great resources around the city. There's counseling that you can get for a subsidized price if cost is an issue. But also we're going to have a link for prayer requests, or if you want to talk to one of the pastors here at Riverwood and you just need people to come alongside you and pray with you and chat with you or listen. And so you can access that also on our website. Just fill out a form and let us know how we can be praying for you, or if you want to be talking to a pastor. We are all in this together. You are not alone, and take heart. Jesus has overcome the world.